What if I told you that your desire to be liked, to avoid conflict, to always be nice, might be the very thing standing in the way of your success, your integrity, and even your happiness? What if the relentless pursuit of politeness, of pleasing others, is not only a waste of your energy, but a direct path to self-doubt, frustration, and resentment? What if the secret to true respect from others and yourself is not in being nice, but in being something far more powerful, far more authentic? We live in a world obsessed with niceness. We are told that the key to success, to building strong relationships, to being accepted and respected, is to be agreeable, to always put others' needs before our own, to never rock the boat. But what if I told you that niceness, that smile you put on when you're angry, that compromise you make when your heart says no, is not a sign of virtue? What if it's actually a trap? You see, niceness is a mask. It's a social currency we exchange to avoid rejection, to maintain peace at the cost of truth. But at what cost? In trying so desperately to avoid confrontation and discomfort, we lose sight of who we truly are. We give up our boundaries, our authenticity, our self-respect. We end up resenting those we've tried so hard to please. And most tragically, we resent ourselves. The unexpected key to real respect, respect that lasts, that builds trust, and that elevates your life, is not niceness. It's the courage to speak the truth, to set boundaries, to act with integrity, even when it risks discomfort, rejection, or disapproval. In this world, niceness has become a substitute for courage, but we need courage. We need authenticity. We need the strength to be kind, but not nice. To stand up for ourselves, for others, and for what is right, regardless of the consequences. Tonight, I want to show you that the path to respect is not paved with pleasantries, but with the discomfort of truth, the firmness of boundaries, and the unshakable foundation of self-respect. Are you ready to stop being nice and start being real? To stop seeking approval and start demanding respect? If so, let's begin. In contemporary culture, there is a significant and often dangerous conflation between being nice and being kind. These words are used interchangeably, but they point to fundamentally different modes of interacting with the world. Niceness is surface level. It's agreeable. It's appeasing. It's what we do when we want to avoid conflict, when we wish to be seen as morally upstanding without engaging in the difficult work that real virtue demands. Kindness, on the other hand, is structured around truth and strength. It's principled. It is often uncomfortable, and it demands that we confront ourselves and others with clarity and courage. Now, this distinction is not merely semantic, it's psychological. It's moral. Being nice is rooted in social conformity. It's the path of least resistance. It's a strategy, often unconscious, for gaining approval or avoiding rejection. A nice person smiles when they're angry. They agree when they disagree. They suppress discomfort not only in themselves, but in those around them. They maintain peace, but it's a counterfeit peace, a brittle facade. They sacrifice the truth in favor of harmony, but not the kind of harmony that brings order. No, the kind of false harmony that eventually collapses under the weight of denied reality. Kindness, however, demands confrontation with reality. It is predicated on the idea that the truth, painful as it may be, is ultimately redemptive. Kindness may hurt in the short term, but it heals in the long run. If your friend is drinking themselves into oblivion, Niceness tells them it's fine. Kindness drags them out of the bar, looks them in the eye, and says, "You're killing yourself, and I won't stand by and watch." Kindness is disciplined. It is structured around the cultivation of the good, the truthful, and the beautiful. It says, "I will not allow you or me to devolve into chaos, even if telling the truth costs me your approval." So what's the alternative? We must cultivate kindness, not niceness. We must teach ourselves and our children that true virtue includes courage, that telling the truth is an act of love, that boundaries are necessary for authentic connection, and that sometimes kindness means saying no. Sometimes it means walking away. Sometimes it means risking rejection for the sake of integrity. And in those moments, we do not shrink, we stand, we act. Because we understand that a life built on truth is far more valuable than a life built on approval. People-pleasing may seem harmless on the surface. After all, what could be wrong with wanting to make others happy? But underneath that smiling compliance lies something corrosive, the steady erosion of self-respect. When you prioritize others' expectations above your own needs and values, you're making an unspoken declaration that your voice, your boundaries, your truth are less important. That subtle self-betrayal, when repeated often enough, becomes a habit. And that habit becomes your identity. You forget who you are, what you want, and why it matters. Psychologically, this is a dangerous game. The compulsion to please often originates in childhood, where love is experienced as conditional, where approval must be earned, not simply received. The child who learns that being good secures affection internalizes a false belief that compliance is the only path to connection. But as adults, this manifests in anxiety, chronic guilt, burnout, and resentment. The people pleaser becomes a chameleon, shifting shape to avoid rejection. But no matter how much they give, it's never enough because their sense of worth is outsourced. And worse, people pleasing doesn't even yield real connection. You can't truly be loved if you're not fully seen. When you constantly suppress your needs to maintain peace or avoid conflict, you teach others that your boundaries don't matter, and you train yourself to expect mistreatment. Respect, both from others and yourself, demands that you learn to say no, not as an act of rebellion, but as an affirmation of your own dignity. When you stop people pleasing, you begin people teaching, showing others how to engage with the real you. Self-respect is not arrogance, it's alignment. And once you reclaim that inner compass, you stop seeking validation from others and start honoring your truth. That is the foundation of adult psychological sovereignty. You become someone others can count on, not because you say yes to everything, but because when you say yes, it means something. Much of what we label as niceness is, at its core, a fear response. It's a reflexive strategy used to manage risk, the risk of rejection, confrontation, or being misunderstood. For many, being nice becomes a socially acceptable disguise for a deeper emotional reality, fear of standing alone. Niceness, when rooted in fear, becomes a defense mechanism. It says, if I just stay agreeable, if I just avoid rocking the boat, maybe I won't get hurt. It becomes a passive form of control, a way to avoid vulnerability under the illusion of social grace. But fear, when unacknowledged and unintegrated, runs our lives from the shadows. If you're constantly censoring yourself to avoid offense, if you're tiptoeing around hard conversations, if you're always agreeable, even when you disagree, you're not being kind. You're being controlled by fear. And what is more dangerous than fear masquerading as virtue? Because it allows the lie to flourish unchecked. It denies others the opportunity to see and respond to your authentic self. Worse, it denies you the opportunity to practice courage. Courage is not the absence of fear, it's the willingness to move forward despite it. When you stop being nice out of fear and start being honest out of integrity, something profound happens. People respect you, not because you're harsh or confrontational, but because you're real. And being real is far more courageous than being nice. The world needs fewer nice people and more brave ones. People who can say what they mean, stand by their convictions, and walk away when something compromises their soul. Fear keeps you small. It keeps your voice silent and your power leashed. But once you confront the fear beneath your niceness, you begin to realize something freeing. That truth-telling, boundary setting, and self-respect are not aggressive acts. They are acts of self-liberation. And in liberating yourself, you give others permission to do the same. We live in a time where the idea of unconditional availability is celebrated as virtue, always being reachable, always saying yes, always being agreeable. But this constant openness does not foster deep trust, it erodes it. Why? Because people do not trust those who have no limits. Boundaries are not barriers, they are signals of self-respect and emotional maturity. They communicate, this is who I am, this is what I value, and this is how I expect to be treated. Paradoxically, the more clearly you define your limits, the more secure and predictable you become to others. Psychologically, trust is formed through consistency and integrity. When you establish and enforce your boundaries, others know where you stand. They know what to expect. They don't have to guess at your emotions or walk on eggshells. This reliability is the soil in which trust grows. Compare this to someone who is endlessly nice, who bends with every gust of expectation. You can't rely on that person because you never know if they're being honest or just agreeable. Over time, that uncertainty breeds suspicion. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Setting boundaries will sometimes disappoint people. It may even anger them. But the discomfort of disappointing others is far less damaging than the self-betrayal of living without limits. Boundaries are not about keeping people out. They're about letting the right people in, those who can meet you where you truly are. They are a filter through which respect and authenticity can flow. When you say no with clarity and conviction, you teach people that your yes has value. You show them that your time, your energy, your presence are not up for grabs. They are offered with intention. And this kind of selective generosity creates deeper, more meaningful relationships, both personally and professionally. People trust those who respect themselves. They admire those who know who they are and where they stand. Boundaries are not selfish. They are foundational. They are the architecture of respect, the scaffolding of trust. Without them, even the most well-intentioned relationships collapse under the weight of confusion and resentment. With them, we create spaces where truth can thrive, where individuals are free to be fully themselves, and where respect is not demanded, but earned. There is an archetype that we unconsciously admire across every culture and every era. The person who is unapologetically themselves. The individual who doesn't shrink to fit in, who doesn't edit themselves to match the mood of the room. They are not reckless, but they are honest. They are not loud, but they are real. This quality, authenticity, is magnetic. It commands attention, not because it seeks it, but because it embodies something that is becoming increasingly rare in our hyper, curated, approval-driven society. Integrity of self. The pursuit of approval is a natural human inclination. We are social creatures wired to seek belonging. But when approval becomes the metric for value, we lose something vital. We become performers instead of participants in our own lives. Every decision, every word, every action becomes a calculation. Will this be liked? Will I still be accepted? In this state, we abandon our inner compass in favor of external applause. And ironically, we become invisible, not because people don't see us, but because we stop showing them who we really are. Authenticity, by contrast, is a declaration, this is me. Not the polished, perfect version, but the honest, evolving self. It requires vulnerability, the willingness to be seen, flaws and all. And that's terrifying. But it's also liberating, because when you drop the mask, you realize something extraordinary. The people who truly matter don't love you because you meet their expectations. They love you because you've given them something real to hold on to. From a psychological standpoint, living authentically is one of the most stabilizing and self-affirming things you can do. It grounds you. It strengthens your identity. It reduces anxiety because you're no longer performing. You're just being. And even when you face rejection, that rejection stings less. Why? Because you were rejected for being real, not for being fake. And that kind of rejection, though painful, is clarifying. It reinforces that your value isn't dependent on consensus. Approval is conditional, fleeting, and ultimately unsatisfying. It shifts with trends, with moods, with other people's insecurities. But authenticity is enduring. It grows stronger with time, and it draws the right people, opportunities, and outcomes into your life. The cost of approval is authenticity, and the cost of authenticity is approval. You must choose which is worth more. And when you choose authenticity, you don't just gain self-respect, you gain freedom. Real, unshakable freedom. Resentment is one of the most misunderstood emotional responses in our psychological landscape. It's frequently labeled as negative, immature, or even petty, something to suppress, to ignore, to rise above. But that is a misdiagnosis. Resentment, like pain, is not the problem. It's a symptom. It's an internal alarm system telling you that somewhere in your life, a boundary has been violated, a value has been compromised, or a need has gone unmet. And if you want to live a truthful life, one grounded in dignity, not denial, you cannot afford to ignore it. When you feel resentment, don't dismiss it. Examine it. What provoked it? Was it a repeated favor you never wanted to give? Was it silence you maintained when you wanted to speak? Was it a yes you offered when everything in your body screamed? Now, that tension, that internal division, is where resentment is born. It's a signal that you've betrayed yourself or allowed yourself to be betrayed under the guise of harmony or obligation. And while society may tell you that good people don't get resentful, the truth is, honest people do. And they listen to it. In many cases, resentment is the emotional residue left behind when niceness overrides authenticity. You said nothing to avoid conflict. You agreed to things that drained you. You smiled when you should have spoken. And in those moments, you abandoned your inner authority in exchange for temporary peace. But peace that requires you to silence yourself is not peace. It's quiet despair. And resentment is that despair rising to the surface, trying to get your attention. Psychologically, resentment functions as a protective mechanism. It lets you know that you are not aligned with your values, that you are out of sync with your own truth. This is not an excuse to lash out or become bitter. It's a call to action. It demands self-inquiry. It asks, where did I go silent when I needed to speak? Or why am I giving more than I can sustain? Or what contract, spoken or unspoken, have I entered that no longer serves me? Listening to resentment is not indulgence, it's integrity. Because when you trace it to its root, it almost always leads to something you've tolerated too long. And this gives you a choice to set a new boundary, to tell the truth, to renegotiate the terms of your relationships, both with others and with yourself. That choice is where your power lies. That's where transformation begins. So, stop vilifying resentment. Start honoring it. It's not a flaw in your character. It's feedback from your soul. And the people who respect themselves don't suppress their resentment. They translate it into truth, into boundaries, into change. That's how you stop being nice and start becoming someone real, someone respected. Saying no is perhaps one of the most powerful, yet often underutilized tools in the human arsenal for self-preservation and self-respect. In a world that constantly demands your time, energy, and attention, the ability to say no is not just an option, it is a necessity, but there is more to saying no than mere resistance. In fact, it's one of the most profound acts of self-definition that you can perform. Every time you say no, you are affirming who you are, what you value, and what you are unwilling to tolerate. You are drawing a line in the sand, and that line is the boundary of your dignity. Many people, especially those who have been conditioned to please others, see saying no as an act of aggression or selfishness. But this is a misunderstanding rooted in fear and insecurity. When you say no, you are not rejecting others. You are asserting your own right to choose how you invest your resources. You are claiming your autonomy, and with it, your responsibility. It's a declaration that you will not be moved by every whim and demand. You will not be a passive participant in your own life. You will be the author of your own story. Psychologically, saying no is an expression of self-respect. It is a signal that you understand the value of your time, your energy, and your mental health. It's a recognition that these precious resources must be guarded, not hoarded or hidden away, but deployed with intentionality. You don't say no to others to be rude, but rather to preserve your sense of self in the face of external pressures. The truth is, if you don't say no, you will end up saying yes to things that erode your very sense of being. You will drown in obligations and lose touch with your own priorities. And here's the paradox: saying no actually opens the door to more meaningful relationships. The relationships that endure are not those that exist only to fulfill the needs of others at the expense of your own. Those are transactional, not genuine. Real relationships, the ones that are grounded in respect, are built on a foundation of mutual understanding and boundaries. When you say no, you communicate your worth. You tell people that your time is valuable and that you expect the same consideration in return. This is not about being rigid, it's about being clear. It's about showing up for yourself first so that you can show up for others with full presence and energy. Moreover, saying no is liberating. It cuts through the clutter of external expectations and allows you to focus on what truly matters. It frees you from the tyranny of constant approval seeking and shifts your energy into areas that promote personal growth and fulfillment. When you say no to what doesn't align with your values, you say yes to a more authentic life. You reclaim your power. You define your own worth by the way you choose to invest your time, not by the demands of others. So, the next time you feel that urge to complain, to be nice, to avoid the discomfort of disappointing someone, remember, saying no is not a rejection of others, but a profound acceptance of yourself. It is the act of saying, I matter. It is the act of self-definition. And in doing so, you reinforce the boundaries that allow you to live a life of authenticity, respect, and genuine connection. Living with purpose is often romanticized as a pursuit of clarity, satisfaction, and fulfillment. The prevailing narrative tells us that when we find our true calling, everything will fall into place, that the path will be paved with certainty and joy. But the truth is much more complex and far less comfortable. Living with purpose requires discomfort, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you a fantasy. The discomfort we speak of is not merely physical, it's psychological, emotional, and spiritual. It's the unease that comes from pushing yourself outside of what you know, from confronting the unknown, from making choices that may not be popular or easy. It's the tension between the life you are currently living and the life you are capable of living. And that tension is where growth happens. Without discomfort, there can be no transformation. Without discomfort, there can be no expansion of the self. Let's consider an example. Every time you attempt to improve, whether it's your career, your relationships, or your health, you will encounter obstacles. The first obstacle is often internal. It's the resistance that arises from your own limitations, fears, and insecurities. This resistance is not a sign that you're on the wrong path. It's a sign that you're pushing against your own boundaries. And that's exactly where you need to be if you want to grow. The discomfort you feel when you push yourself to do more, to be more, to step outside your comfort zone, that's the discomfort of progress. But here's the catch. Most people avoid this discomfort. They seek out comfort and ease instead. They shy away from challenging conversations, from difficult decisions, from uncertainty. They remain in jobs they don't love, relationships that drain them, or habits that hold them back because it feels easier than facing the discomfort that change demands. This is the danger of complacency. It robs you of your potential. You cannot live a life of purpose by avoiding the necessary discomfort of change. And this discomfort is not something to be feared. It is something to be embraced. Discomfort is the fertile ground in which purpose takes root. It is through the pain of confronting your limitations that you begin to realize what you are truly capable of. It is in the struggle that you discover your strength. Think of the way muscles grow. They tear under strain, and it is through that tearing and rebuilding process that they become stronger. The same principle applies to your psyche, your character, and your life. Purpose requires effort. It requires sacrifice. It requires the willingness to endure discomfort in order to emerge stronger and more aligned with your true self. Now, discomfort should not be confused with needless suffering. Not all discomfort is productive or necessary, but the discomfort that comes from pushing yourself, from facing challenges, from aligning your actions with your values. This is the kind of discomfort that leads to fulfillment. It leads to a sense of meaning. It leads to a life worth living. In the end, living with purpose is not about seeking a life of ease or perpetual happiness. It's about pursuing something greater than yourself, something that calls you to rise above your current limitations, to face the discomfort that comes with growth, and to ultimately emerge more whole, more authentic, and more connected to the truth of who you are. So, if you are looking to live a purposeful life, don't shy away from discomfort. Lean into it. Let it guide you. And remember, it's not a sign that you're on the wrong path. It's the mark of a life well lived. So many people wait for permission. They wait for someone to give them the green light, the stamp of approval, the external validation that says, now you're allowed to begin. They wait for the right moment, the perfect circumstances, or some form of divine approval. But here's the uncomfortable truth: permission is an illusion. The only permission you need to live a meaningful, authentic life is your own. This isn't to say that external guidance or feedback is irrelevant. It's not to dismiss the importance of mentorship or advice. But the reliance on external permission is a trap. It keeps you paralyzed, waiting for some future moment when everything will be just right. And that moment never comes. The reality is, life is chaotic, uncertain, and often messy. There will never be a perfect time to pursue your dreams, to take a risk, to step outside your comfort zone. There will only be the decision to begin and the courage to act even when the road ahead is unclear. One of the most limiting beliefs we harbor is the idea that we need to be ready before we can move forward. We wait until we're fully prepared, until we have all the answers, until we know exactly how things will unfold. But in truth, the act of moving forward, of taking that first step, however imperfect, is what prepares you. The clarity doesn't come before the action. It comes through the action itself. You grow through doing, through experimenting, through learning in real time. But if you wait for permission, you rob yourself of the opportunity to grow. Psychologically, the desire for permission stems from a deeper insecurity, a fear of judgment, of rejection, or of failure. You look to others for approval because you're not confident in your own judgment. But this is precisely where your power lies, in reclaiming that confidence, in trusting yourself enough to make decisions, even in the absence of external validation. Self-trust is the foundation of all meaningful action. If you wait for someone else to tell you it's okay to proceed, you're giving away your agency, your autonomy, and your ability to shape your own life. When you stop waiting for permission, you take back control. You realize that you are the author of your own narrative. You start taking responsibility for your choices, for your actions, and for your future. And while this might be uncomfortable, because it means stepping into the unknown, facing uncertainty, and risking failure, it's also liberating. You are no longer dependent on others to decide your worth or your path. You realize that the only person whose approval you need is your own. This doesn't mean rejecting input from others. It means recognizing that you are the ultimate authority in your life. It means that you stop looking outside yourself for answers and start looking within. You don't need someone else to give you the go ahead to live fully, to pursue your passions, to set ambitious goals. You can begin right now, even if the circumstances are less than ideal, even if you don't have all the answers, even if the road ahead is uncertain. The first step, the decision to act, is the permission you've been waiting for. Stop waiting for someone to tell you it's okay. The time is now. The world is waiting for the real you to show up unapologetically without asking for permission. The truth is, no one else can give you the life you want. Only you can. It's time to start living like you own it. Living without boundaries is, at its core, an invitation for resentment to take root. Boundaries are the lines we draw in our lives to protect our time, energy, and emotional well-being. They are not walls to keep people out, but structures that allow us to engage meaningfully with the world around us. When you live without boundaries, you invite chaos, disrespect, and ultimately, a growing sense of bitterness. The absence of boundaries is not a virtue, it's an erosion of self-respect. Psychologically, living without boundaries is a way of sacrificing your needs and desires for the sake of others. It's the perpetual willingness to accommodate, to say yes when you should say no, to ignore your own limits, to avoid conflict, or maintain the appearance of harmony. But what happens when you do this too often? You begin to lose yourself. Your needs are pushed aside, your feelings are suppressed, and the resentment starts to bubble beneath the surface. Over time, that resentment doesn't just go away. It festers. It turns into frustration, anger, and a sense of helplessness. When you have no boundaries, you can become a doormat. Others walk over you, taking advantage of your inability to say no, your reluctance to assert your needs. They may not do this maliciously, but it doesn't matter. The end result is the same. You're left feeling drained, used, and unseen. The irony here is that, in the effort to avoid confrontation, you end up creating a situation where conflict is inevitable, only it's not the kind of conflict that can be resolved through communication. It's the silent, simmering conflict of resentment. Living without boundaries also sabotages relationships. You might think that by constantly giving, you are nurturing connection, but in reality, you're teaching others to take you for granted. You're communicating that your time and energy are unlimited, and this sets an unsustainable precedent. People will not respect you if you don't first respect yourself. When you refuse to set limits, you inadvertently train others to expect more from you than you are able to give. And when you inevitably reach your breaking point, the resentment builds up. It's a destructive cycle that perpetuates itself. Boundaries, on the other hand, create clarity and trust. They tell others that you value yourself, that you understand your worth, and that you are not willing to sacrifice your integrity for the comfort of others. Boundaries are not about rejecting people or closing yourself off. They are about ensuring that the relationships you engage in are healthy, balanced, and based on mutual respect. Setting boundaries is the ultimate act of self-respect because it acknowledges that you are worthy of consideration and care. The key here is not to wait until resentment has already begun to erode your emotional reserves. By the time resentment makes its appearance, you're already operating from a place of depletion. The goal is to recognize the signs early, to honor your own needs, and to assert your limits before you reach the point of exhaustion and anger. Learning to say no, to establish clear boundaries, and to communicate your needs is a process of reclaiming your power and reclaiming your life. In the end, living without boundaries isn't a noble sacrifice. It's an abdication of responsibility to yourself. It's an open invitation for resentment to invade every aspect of your life, from your relationships to your sense of self-worth. If you want to live authentically, with integrity, and with genuine connection, boundaries are essential. They are the foundation of healthy relationships, and they are the antidote to the bitterness that comes from overgiving and underappreciation. So let me leave you with this: stop being nice. Stop hiding behind pleasantries and shallow gestures in the name of keeping the peace. Stop sacrificing your truth, your dignity, and your worth for the sake of approval. Real respect, the kind that builds real relationships, the kind that empowers you to live with integrity, is never found in superficial niceness. It's found in the courage to be authentic, to set boundaries, to speak the hard truth, and to stand firm even when it's uncomfortable. Respect is not a byproduct of compliance. It is the product of strength, and that strength is built on the foundation of self-respect. If you want others to respect you, the first step is to respect yourself by knowing where your limits are, by standing your ground, and by refusing to compromise your values for anyone, including yourself. The world does not need more nice people who are afraid to say no, who are afraid to speak up, who are afraid to be rejected. It needs people who are strong enough to tell the truth, who are brave enough to create boundaries, and who are secure enough to walk away from what doesn't serve their highest good. When you stop being nice and start being kind, truly, fiercely kind, you'll find that people respect you more. Not because you're agreeable or easy to please, but because you are unwavering in your authenticity, in your integrity, in your refusal to be anything other than who you truly are. So let this be your challenge. Be real. Be strong. Be unapologetically, unshakably you. Stop waiting for permission. Stop living for approval. And watch as the respect you've been longing for from others and from yourself comes flooding into your life. Thank you.